Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Network. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. Today, we are going to be talking about the impact of supply chain shortages on public works and municipal services. And we have the brightest guys in the room right now, with the smartest guys that know a lot about public works. They've been in the industry a long time. So everybody that's watching, thank you for joining us. If you have any, you're like looking around. Anybody that has any comments while we're having our discussion, feel free to chime in, and we'll address those comments as we go. If they're really you didn't like what we said, feel free to comment anyway, because we'll address that as well. If you love what we said, make those comments, and thanks for supporting us. So, Bill Davis is the Richland County, South Carolina Director of Utilities. Is that right, Bill?
You got it. You
Thank you for
nailed it.
joining me. Thanks for joining us. And then Dennis Truex is the 2022 American Society of Civil Engineer President. Thank you for joining us, Dennis.
Thanks for the
And then
invitation.
I have Trino Pedraza, who is Pedraza. Did I say it wrong?
Pedraza.
Pedraza. It's early. It's 9 o'clock. I don't know. I just worked through that. Thank you for joining us, Trino, Galveston, Texas. Director of Utilities. Well, Director of Public Works. Everything there, right? So you do everything pretty much at that point. So thanks for joining me, guys. Truly appreciate it. Bill, we're going to start with you. You were talking about supply chain issues and how they're potentially impacting the Build Back Better funding. And I'm going to start with you and give us some enlightening insights on like what you're experiencing in supply chain issues.
Well, I'll talk about supply chain now, but we do need to talk about the Build Back Better because there's a lot of things in there that we really can kind of chime in on today. But one of the things with supply chain that we've noticed is even just piping. People are having to order piping ahead of time. We're actually looking at some federal funding that we're facing right now, and it's a $10 million fund. And in order for us to get it done in time, they put a tight time limit on it. And so we have to get the engineering and the construction completed by June the 1st of 2026 for a wastewater treatment plant. That's a lot of material. So we're having to use some, creative thought processes on how we're going to get this equipment because pumps are, sometimes now, I know you guys will probably have some input on that, but sometimes, 9 months now, 12 months. I mean, depends on what type of new pump you're ordering, because a lot of the problem is not necessarily just the pumps, but the electronic components, just getting electronic components. We're about to demolish a wastewater plant that we replaced and put into ours. And the contractor came out and he was like going all giddy and everything because there was some control panels in there. He was going to take the old control panels and use them in a new plant he was doing because he couldn't find the new stuff that he wanted. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. Wow. I don't know what y'all are seeing.
That's Dennis. I think you were something else. Electrical components was a thing you were brought up too.
Well, what I've seen in traveling around the country over the past year, really, and there's a lot of causative factors, but of late, and really we need to talk about today and tomorrow rather than yesterday, other than to learn the lessons from yesterday. I'm finding a lot of spot issues. So, for example, when I was traveling in Ohio, the one building material of greatest concern there is cement. Because as a result of IRA, Intel's building a just gargantuan facility in northern Ohio, and they've gone around preemptively, intelligently contracting with the vendors and have effectively locked up most of the cement, if not all of it. And so now everybody else, of course, still needs cement, and it becomes a matter of, well, where's it going to come from? And then you move into another area. I was out in Utah, and the issue was electrical switchgear. Whether it was chip or not, it was still a matter of being able to, the electronics pieces and that supply chain issue. And then I was in Connecticut, and the issue over there was road materials. And in other places in the country, it's steel. And so there is the supply chain issue is become localized. I'm not seeing, at least from where I've been, a broad issue. universally distributed supply chain failure simply because the supply chain's in place. The failure is in that the market we live in today, the environment we live in today, has changed so drastically in such a short period of time that a lot of individuals haven't pivoted. And we can talk, we can talk more about that, but it is an issue. It's just a matter of how we're going to deal with it in the near term, and for that matter, whether this changes the industry, the AEC industry moving forward, or whether it's just simply a matter of pivoting for the near term.
Yeah, that's we'll come back to that one, Dennis. Trino, how are you? Hearing what Bill's talking about and Dennis is talking about, how are these supply chain issues affecting you?
Seems like I'm seeing everything that Dennis is only seeing in spots. So I'm in Texas, and as he was speaking of some of the different states, he talked about road materials, electrical components, cement issues. And it seems like here we are having issues with all of those. When it comes to road materials, I'm struggling to get limestone. I'm struggling to get cement stabilized sand as base material. We were just working on uh, a concrete or cement contract that we have with one of the nearby distributors, and they have increased their prices to the point where the contract that we're in is about to exceed, or is going to exceed, that 25% change order rule that we're restricted to, which is now putting us in a position to have different discussions with them. Either we're going to have to break the contract and go back out for bids, or they're going to have to honor their prices. I was speaking with another contractor just this morning, and they were saying that on one of the contracts that we put out for bid, the concrete or cement material provider is already trying to change the bid price. And then when it comes to like the electrical components, I mean, I'm seeing it across the board. We too are building a wastewater treatment plant, and I received from one of the bidders a message saying that the electrical components were 20 weeks out. Mm-hmm. And that would be from the time that we actually, decide to sign up with them on contract, right? So that's a no good. All of our water meters are solid state meters, and so they've been on short supply coming in. They've been delayed. Our advanced metering infrastructure project has been slowed. It's going very well. They're starting to ramp up. However, the delays we had have been because of electronic components inside the meters that they've outsourced from some other country, and they had to change how they were getting that part in order to ramp up. Then on another note, like hearing Bill's comments, I was just curious, have y'all considered doing construction manager at risk, since you're in such a tight timeline, which would at least allow y'all to order all the electrical and pump and motor equipment up front and let the designer design around it.
Yeah, I think one of the to kind of answer that question, one of the things that we are looking at doing, we have a 46% match on this wastewater plant. But one of the first things I wanted to bring up is historically, I know, Trino, you have some history with utilities before you were the boss of everything. But with utilities, you typically saw on a wastewater plant somewhere between $3.50 and maybe $6 a gallon for a brand new wastewater plant. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing something between $15 and $24 for a new plant. And the plant that I was planning on building was going to be 5 million gallons, but now I'm building 1.3 because I'm not able to afford $14-15 a gallon to build a wastewater plant. That's an extreme amount of money compared to, that's like a 300% increase.
Okay.
And yeah, back to your point, Trino, about the just what can we do? Well, first and foremost, we looked at the matching. We can spend the matching as long as that meets our requirements. So what we're looking to do is try to get the equipment ordered well in advance. So what we'll do is we'll go through an or equal process, because we have to meet our own criteria, which is to get bids for certain equipment. We'll either sole source what we can, or we'll get in and say, okay, we're going to have at least two. We're going to match those up to each other, and then we'll pick one and we'll go ahead and order it, and then we'll design around the equipment that we've ordered, and the structure itself will be covered under the grant funding. So we're going to purchase a lot of that equipment ahead.
Sure. So it's interesting what you were saying, and I don't know if I did the calculation right. So if I did it wrong, do not hesitate to correct me. But you were talking about the cost per gallon and the recent bids that we've just opened here in the last few weeks, and we've just actually evaluated the bidders. It's looking like the cost for our plant is going to be $23 million, but it's a 500,000 gallon plant.
Yeah.
Calculation right, that's like $46 a gallon.
It's ridiculous.
Wow.
So that is silly. And I'll tell you what, we had this plant designed and we thought ready to go almost a year and a half ago, right? And so when we got it ready for bid, the engineers OPCC was $8,500,000. And then when we were getting ready for bid, we brought some money over. We said, you know what? We don't really trust that. The times are changing. Let's throw a couple million, another 2.5 million into the bucket just for preparation.
Mm-hmm.
When the original bids came in, they came in somewhere north of 16 million. But that bid was a low bid only because a contractor was mobilized here and we didn't have the money, right? So we had to put it off, secure funding, issue a bond, and then we went out for bid again. And now the lowest bid or the best value bid is 23 million in just that short time.
Yeah, I got a similar story. We had a subdivision that needed to be completely rehabilitated, and it was going to be a $3.5 million job in 2016. And by the time we had a lawsuit over the construction, they didn't want to do it. Somebody sued us, said they didn't want to do the project. It delayed the project, so we got back on track right about the time the pandemic hit, and we got back off track. And then I got here in 2020, and we got it back on track, and we were getting ready to bid it, had some delays. So come 2022, first of 2022, the $3.5 million job was now $6.5 million job.
Yeah. Insane.
So we couldn't build it because we didn't have money.
Right. Insane. And, it's interesting too, that you mentioned there was a lawsuit because the contractor didn't want to do that. We just went through that. We had gone for bids on a complete road reconstruction to include the water, sewer pipe, and drainage pipe that was underground. And the contractor that bidded, who had the best value for the bid, and they seemed to be right on top of what we wanted and needed, they had delays in the materials, and so that delayed their project, and then cost change, especially with pipe. And then they found themselves in a position where they felt like they were losing money on this project. So their answer to it was to just stop and start change ordering us to death. And they were pretty blunt with the fact that they wanted to be fired from it. So in the end, we renegotiated some things. We pulled so much out of the project and just got it to a point where they were satisfied and we were satisfied. But we're not going to have a complete project like we did at the beginning. They're going to replace some water pipe now, and that's about it. And someone else is going to redo the street. So it's just different times.
Let me step in, guys, and ask the question. And I think, Trina, you're kind of giving the indication. One of the things we talk about is that historically there's been kind of I'm going to say siloing of responsibilities. The owner passes this off to the engineer, the designer in the broader sense. The designer then interfaces in some way with the contractor to try and deliver product that the owner wants. And the communication between these silos historically in the best environment has been non-existent, and worse environment has been adversarial. And that's the environment I grew up as a young engineer, which I didn't like, didn't think it was very productive, but I was also a young engineer. Today, I think even more so. It's extremely important for the contractors to talk to the vendors, and the contractors to talk to the designers, and the designers to talk to the owners in a collaborative environment to say, and in the case of the wastewater treatment plant, okay, this is what we have designed. Is it designed around a particular piece of equipment that is the fulcrum for our problem? Or can we pivot and look at alternative equipment with design adjustments that bring this in on time and to a greater degree of completion and still does the job that we want? And in some cases, I think that's possible. In some cases, it may not be. It depends upon the level of specificity used in designing the project. But let me say that also in those travels that I talked about, I saw the same thing. That projects that were estimated in the middle part of the last decade, where you might have thought 4 or 5%, 6% inflation, have doubled and tripled in price. And that's impacted scope, that's impacted quality, it's impacted just about every aspect of the delivered product, as well as adversely impacted those that are trying to deliver the product.
Wow.
And
I think
that's
you're right.
not a healthy environment.
Well, when you start looking at, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as I was listening to all three of you guys talk, and just some, on top of everything you guys are talking about, the inflation, the cost, and then labor shortages. I mean, we didn't get to that. Like the quality of infrastructure, in my mind, that's what I'm thinking about. Like we're already pulling, things out of some projects, trying to get it at the cost to make everybody happy, but now we got labor shortages, and then the quality of labor, we don't even know what that's like when they're building this infrastructure now. It's like hopefully there's a lot of oversight, but anyway, that was my 2 cents. Go ahead, Bill.
No, it plays right in. That's a major factor, on these costs that Trino and I were talking about. And I don't know, it sounds like things are similar in Texas, maybe even worse than they are in South Carolina. But when you start looking at cutting that quality, we've seen that in the past in South Carolina, where you start accepting, some off-brand material at a wastewater plant. And the next thing you know, that equipment may last 3 years and it's already failed, versus using, some tried and true equipment. It may be worth the cost and the wait. And even though nowadays, even the good pumps are only lasting about 10 years. And I talk more about water, wastewater. So I'm talking about pumping processes and things like that. That's a large portion of the cost for a project. And if they're having to be replaced on a more frequent basis, it's very burdensome on the people that are paying for the water and sewer service. So then you're getting into affordability. So we've lost quality, and now we've lost experience, because the people that are doing it don't have any experience, and they're doing it wrong, and it doesn't last as long. We've seen that. And then you start failing sooner. So now your operation and maintenance costs are going through the roof, which means you're paying more for the materials, you're paying more for the labor, you're paying more for everything. So now everything's escalated. I had one contractor that's a design build contractor, Trino, like you were talking about. Very good, reputable contractor in the area, in the Carolinas. And they were saying that what I was asking for what's a rule of thumb these days? Is the rule of thumb still 40% labor on top of the material cost? How does that work? And he's like, oh, no, you can't do that anymore. And I'm like, well, he said, well, actually the line work is the one we're having to deal with. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we have to do by hours now. He said, because if you start trying to do a rule of thumb number, it's going to be totally off, because we're having to pay way more per manpower, hour. So we have to know how far it is, because we know how much we can lay in so many days. So we have to calculate how many days, how many crews and crew chiefs and operators of different type of equipment. He said, we can't even price it like that anymore.
Right. Yeah. And going to the supply, it's nice that we've gotten to the workforce issue, because that is a supply chain issue.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, and this is, I'm partly academician, partly engineer, discredit myself on the front end, those who can't teach. But in the same sense, guys, I've had several consulting firms and been in construction and done CM and the rest. Not CM at risk. That was a little beyond where I wanted to go. But what I wanted to say was this supply chain issue has been spoken about and talked about. Human supply chain workforce issue has been talked about for over a decade. And it's at multiple levels. It's engineering, it's in construction, it's in the trades, it's in the skilled labor, and we've literally done nothing about it. We've waited for the train wreck to occur. Now we're arguing over what's the impact of 3% unemployment. Well, part of them is the inflation that's generated by higher interest rates that are trying to get that unemployment rate back up to 5%, where then wages begin to moderate. And that's part of the conversation that's going on literally today. But what I advocate for is a new, again, going back to a new paradigm that's very old, and that's looking at apprenticeships and trade relationships and partnering with high schools and community colleges to develop rapid turnaround production of workforce that's specifically targeted to this industry. And it's going to take individuals, not just because they're in the business, but it's going to take all of us in this business to collaborate and work together to try and produce that, to let individuals know what it can be. But as long as you're having to compete on an open market and you're looking at increased wages, increased benefits, bonuses, all kinds of perks, as well as fewer working hours out of a person, this all begins to play in, whether you're trade union or not. And I live in a right to work state, so I mean, we still deal with it here too.
Yeah, Dennis, you bring up some great points. On the utility side, especially where I live, we're in Galveston Island. It's expensive to live here. And so most of the employees that work for us don't live on the island. They live on the mainland, in the various cities within, Southeast Texas. And so it's already hard for us to bring talent in. And so we are now doing different things, but it's reactionary. We probably should have been doing it prior, like you mentioned. We're hitting the high schools. We're trying to set up programs with the high schools so that we get people, learning instrumentation and controls at the high schools, putting them through water classes, wastewater classes, so they could graduate with at least the lowest level license and maybe want to come work, opening internships. We've begun reaching out to the colleges. One of the things that we've turned Galveston into is the training ground for our industry. We're investing quite a bit of money in training our staff to build up the skills that they need. But what happens is you're making them marketable, so a chunk of them then leave. You bring new ones in and you continue the process. And we don't mind being a training ground. We're trying to really monitor the culture that we have here because we want people to stay. So we're trying to give them the culture that makes them want to stay. And then, one of the out of the box things that we have done, especially with some of the higher level positions that, require degrees, but like specified, and specified skill sets. A lot of times traditionally, cities and utilities will have like the canned requirements, right? And the thing is, the canned requirements, like so many licenses, a PE, a degree in this and that and whatnot. So many of these people that are still around and in the market, well, I mean, they're in demand, right? And I was just in the meeting over there near Houston where League City and Pearland and Webster were talking about the fact that they're stealing from each other, the employees, and they're doing it by, increasing costs of wages or whatnot. So one of the things that we've done, and it's worked so far, and I'm sure there will be a time when it's not working, but we've changed some of our, like interviewing habits. So when we start like searching for the people that are putting in their applications, you always will have this group of like recent grads that don't have the minimum qualifications, but have something in their resume that screams, potential diamond in the rough. And what we'll do is we'll actually bring several of them in for interviews along with the people that meet all the requirements. And we're starting to find that some of these have so much passion and so much fire that we're taking the risk and bringing them in instead, and then training them up like we're doing with everyone else. And so far, that has worked really well at moving the train forward in our area. It's keeping us afloat. And, it's just one of the many steps we're trying to do to compete.
Mm.
Yeah.
Let me
That's a
throw a
good.
thought into that. That sounds very progressive, and I applaud you for it. The lack of employee, what I'm going to frame, this is where I come from, the lack of employee loyalty or recognition of the investment that you've made in them to make them successful, that then allows them to jump ship and end up working for somebody else, is going to be an increasing problem, just simply because of the nature of the Gen Zers and millennials that we're working with today, that are working with us today. And one of the things that we're seeing, of course, I've focused more on and have focused more on the engineering community, but I suspect this plays over into all aspects of the AEC community family, is the value set of the individual. I grew up being treated as just another cog in the wheel. I grew up believing in a 1940s and 50s mindset that you sacrifice yourself for the employer. And that meant you gave up time with family, which meant you worked overtime. You gave up your health, which meant you worked sick, that you gave up quality of life issues. You didn't take, when I retired from the university a couple of years ago, I had so much leave time built up because I never felt like I could leave. It increased my retirement by almost 6 years.
Yep.
So there was 6 years of leave it didn't take, but
Wow.
the new generation's not going to put up with that.
No,
And
they don't even want to work 40 hours.
Right.
That's and I mentioned that earlier, that you're paying more and get less in terms of the number of hours, but there's more to that. And I just want to throw this into the mix as well. The value set of these individuals is, in the vast majority of cases, is going to be one of having a social responsibility, a social contract. For over 20 years now, students, by and large, in high schools have had to do service hours in order to graduate. It was just a matter of that social contract piece that got infused into that. So they're coming out of high schools and colleges expecting to do service. And if they don't see how that social contract's being maintained by your company or your agency or your organization, and if they're not part of that, then they become disenfranchised. Yeah. And I've seen this for 20 years where individuals felt like, hey, I'm doing a really great job, but I don't see where I'm impacting the lives of people. So it may be that you take half a day off and do a service project, or maybe even making an opportunity for them to work on a weekend to clean up a park or build in your case, build a playground, or these kinds of social contract things that fulfill that part of the soul. And by you providing that opportunity and the alternative not, you've now got a competitive edge that maybe doesn't cost you a whole lot, maybe half a day's work. But it develops that longevity. So I just throw that in as an idea to think about.
Love it.
Yeah, look, guys, this is good stuff. I want to just chime in a little bit about an interview I did with Landon, who I kind of mentor. He's a colleague, he works for me and stuff like that. We did just what's an 18-year-old thinking nowadays, in high school, getting out of high school, when you graduate, what is it? And I said, what do you expect hourly rates? He was like $30 an hour to go into a manhole or do some kind of physical construction work. $30 an hour is where he set and I was like, wow, that's imagine a young kid at 18 coming in at $30 and you have a seasoned veteran there for $30 an hour. That's not going to go well at all. So
yeah, I mean, just 2 years ago
talking, but I think we need to, and this is just my.
I wish I was making $30 an hour when I crawled into my first manhole.
Right.
I was just going to say, 2 years ago, we were paying $15.50 an hour for people to crawl in a manhole. That's that's almost half of that.
Yeah. But of course, it does take training. When
Yeah, that's how much inflation.
Yeah, but the expectations have to be. Again, it really comes down to those people. Well, I contend that those people that are motivated totally by money will never survive in this industry. Okay, because there's much more to what we do
Yep.
than just making a buck. If
Right.
they're interested in just turning up, making money, go be a barista at Starbucks. Not that they'll make $30 an hour, but you know what I'm saying? What we
Right.
do is so important that the people that will align with our industry, the people that again have that social contract, that want to have an impact, that want to make a difference, and many of them, like what drew me into the industry, was a matter of wanting to build something that I could stand back and point to. And I've known many individuals in architecture and engineering and construction contractors that said that was the thing. I still, I drive by my grandfather's building and point to it and know that my family had something to do with that being there. Visible, impactful, important. And we do that. Everybody on this call does this. Everybody in some ways is being impactful. And I think the new generation, given the vision is that's what we're doing, will resonate with that. And that $30 an hour, well, maybe when you retire from climbing in and out of your calls, you'll be making 30, but not today, kids. Sorry.
Right. Not right out of high school anyway.
Jimmy
Yeah,
Stewart
right.
just made a comment. I was laughing.
Unless they're willing to go spend the $10,000
but
to get OSHA certified and fully trained.
Right.
Bring your own gear for that matter.
What do you guys? I got a question. What do you guys think about, with all the shortages of supplies and then labor shortages? What if we started to, going back to labor, what if we started to rebrand like public works in a better way, like technology driven? I've always thought of this, like, why aren't we like looking at it as tech? Because a lot of technology is coming into public works of how we monitor wastewater and water and all these things. We don't really advertise it that way. It's like, get a job where we're tech focused and where you get a job with us and we're going to teach you how to run water and sewer. We're going to teach you the technology that we bring into this space now, because it's all going to eventually be sensors, SCADA systems are already there, things like that. But also like change it to like, we're kind of like, it's not heroes, but we are kind of making a difference of like, if we didn't have water or sewer, what's that like for your life? It's just kind of looking at things a little differently is what I'm trying to see how we can rebrand it. That's my kind of stance on the labor stuff.
Well, Chad, not to dominate, but in this area, the argument you said the word 3 times, and so I'm going to amplify it. Tech. The generations coming out right now grew up with a smartphone stuck in their ear, and I've heard young people argue, why would you wear a wristwatch when you've got a multi-function watch, phone, internet access, email, or whatever, plus game sitting in your hand. But just what you said, we're using tech in this industry. Both in the construction phase, there's a lot of technology that's going into construction, and then there's also the technology that's used in the industry once the project's in place. And I think it's really a matter of explaining that we don't just dig ditches.
Yes.
It's a really matter of we actually have robots that dig the ditches, and what we're looking for is people that will manage the robots. We have, it's not just that we're growing bacteria in a reactor or treating wastewater. It's that we're using technology to protect the environment. So the rebranding in the conversation, or for that matter, if it's a water plant, we're using technology to protect this city from contamination. And so again, it goes back to that service piece. If we can communicate that what we do, infrastructure in general, is a foundation for economic growth, protection of health, safety, and welfare of the public, it makes an impactful change, and we're doing it in new ways that are constantly changing that challenge. And it's also a matter of emphasizing this isn't for everybody. This isn't something that anybody off the street can do. It takes a special. I challenge students, prospective students. In fact, I changed the narrative on prospective students coming into my department when I took over as department head. And as a result of telling them that this isn't for everybody, this is hard. In fact, my discipline in our program is the hardest program you could ever hope to pick. So if you're not willing to do the hard work, get out now, because I don't have the time to mess with people that don't want to succeed. And the end result was my enrollment tripled
Well, so I'd like to make two comments based on what Dennis was talking about.
There you go.
Well, and you too, Chad. So the first, when it comes to rebranding, I completely agree. Whenever I give presentations at any of the conferences or even around our public, I will bring in all the different technology that we're using and how it's helping them. The problem is that it's not going to the individuals. Many of the youngsters they're in the college kids, they're not at the water conference, right? They're not at an APWA conference, and they're not on our network. So when we're doing things like what we're doing right now, it's seen by our peers that have you know a common connection with us one way or another, and getting that message out beyond our industry, I think would be really important. How to do that, I don't know. But the kids on YouTube, the kids on TikTok, people watching TV, they need to see the industry differently. You know, and
Yeah.
when you consider like a lineman, for example, of all the utilities, a lineman's considered the glamour job, and it kind of stops there, right? But the rest are just as glamorous. And so I think that's key. We do try to focus on making everyone or letting everyone know that our job matters, how we impact people. We talk about it often. We try to celebrate victories often. We try to share any compliment that comes across so that they can, get that feeling in their heart that something that they did something, right? Um, Another component is the way we title our jobs. So like recently we've changed our jobs with all the training that we're doing now. And so like we're like for example on the distribution and collection side, they're now called distribution collection techs, and they have different levels built around a career path that comes with all the training that we're putting them through. And we've done something similar in every group when it comes to streets and traffic, drainage, the water, wastewater supply, and treatment. And so I think that helps, and I think that needs to happen more because when a lot of people talk about public works employees, like an entry level spot is a laborer at a lot of places. If you're thinking of that 18-year-old with $30 in their mind, why would they ever want to apply for a laborer position? Like to me, the word laborer itself is demeaning.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't scream any kind of career growth.
Or
And then
important.
and then you have people going around, you know, further describing laborers as ditch diggers. That doesn't help the market either.
Or equipment operator. What kind
Mhm.
of equipment?
Right.
Tractor?
Right. A lawnmower.
The word that's implicit when you say labor is
Exactly.
unskilled.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it just and
it is.
while
Yeah.
there are levels of skill that are needed, and maybe some individuals don't have a lot of skill, but everybody's got a skill. It's just
Right.
we're not acknowledging it. And what you're doing, Trina, I think is excellent because what you're doing is acknowledging development. I've achieved a certain level of development. Now I've moved to Tech 2 or Tech 3 or however you're labeling it. And if I continue up this path, I'm recognized both with title and with compensation
Right.
as a result that I now have a skill set that people value. And I know how I have a path, a clear path that allows me to develop and build on that skill set so that I increase value and have opportunities for advancement.
See, and then I'll tell you, like one thing that we did see an immediate impact on when we were changing these job titles is we've changed the laborer title to a trainee. And we'll marry it to whatever department it's going to, whether it's going to be like a water trainee or a streets trainee or whatnot, the area that they're going to. But just changing the word to trainee and then describing the position of ultimately what you'd be learning and where you'd be growing, that changed the amount of entry level applicants that we've been seeing. Because there was a point where I could go months and pick up one here, one there, but have 10 open positions.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're starting to see a lot of applicants that we
Mm.
didn't see before because they're seeing the word trainee, and I think it really made a difference, versus a laborer.
Well, I got a couple things to chime in on that. Since we've gone down the workforce road, I want to throw in a couple things. So
Yeah.
if you're looking at workforce, and we're trying to, got to have people that have knowledge of what we do and want to come to do what we do. So how do we get them out there? And you were talking, Chad, you hit the nail on the head. We need to get in the middle schools and the high schools, but who is we? So if we, the ones of us on this call, are the ones getting out there, then we're not doing something else that needs to be done that we're usually doing 2 or 3 levels worth of work, because the people in the middle are shrinking every day. And so we don't have a lot of people to do the things that need to get done while we're out gallivanting and teaching people about water at the high schools and everything. I'm not saying that's not important. I'm saying running the water system or the sewer system takes precedence over going to the high school career days. So I think we need to get into advertising, get into some TikTok preset videos that we as a whole industry pay for these things to get advertised, and we get them on TV, get them on TikTok, we get them on YouTube, we get them on these places where we're paying for a service to get the advertisement out, knowing that the regional impact will help us. And
Right.
secondly, this is one of the points I wanted to make the whole time. I've been over here sitting, waiting, just chiming in. So building back better America. So when you look at the infrastructure law, and I wanted to throw these statistics out and see what you guys think about this. So I met with the Build Back Better team here in Orangeburg, South Carolina, with Congressman Jim Clyburn, EPA Director Michael Regan, and Mitch Landrieu, the czar of Build Back Better America. And it was a pleasure to be there. I was one of only like 16 people, and I may have been the only engineer in the crowd. So there was a couple of other utility people, but I was the only one that was not an elected politician or a mayor or a council person or something like that. I don't know how I got on the panel. They must not have known what my job title was, utility director. And I had made a comment to Mitch Landrieu about the fact that I'm coming from a perspective of not being a politician, but I want to make a point. And he said, wait a minute. He said, I've known a many utility director that became a great politician. So, I mean, he was a pretty funny guy. But I'm going to give them some credit here. So just water sewer. I know there's other statistics, but I want to throw this one out because this is the one I'm an expert on. If you look at the total bill for the infrastructure bill, it was $220 billion, and water, or clean water, got $50 billion. Now, historically, back in the 60s, early 70s, when we had the EPA coming out, new Clean Water Act and all that, we started seeing a rate of somewhere between 60 and 65% federally funded on these major projects, especially here in South Carolina. And that declined rapidly over the last 40, 50 years. And then you've seen now a level previous to this in 2022, your levels were like 5%. So 5% federally funded versus state or other funds, right? So this is a rate of 23%. So they listened because I told them that. I told them there's a website I'll throw out there if y'all don't know about it. It's called waterweekus.us. And it's got a lot of facts that we all use in the water industry to talk about water sewer. So look at South Carolina, just for instance. I'm sure it's relative to all of you. We had 216 grants under the infrastructure law for a total of $1.369 billion out of that $50 billion. And if you look at that rate compared to 2022, the Rural Infrastructure Authority is deliberating this $1.3 billion. Last year, in 2022, they deliberated $30 million for funding. Right. So we're talking about a 45-fold, almost 50 times the amount of money. Now, what does that do? That takes any available people, and you got all these projects to do in 3 years, all across the United States. You're not going to have any laborers. You're not going to have any contractors. You're not going to have any engineers. You're already short. Now you're going to be even shorter, and your labor costs are going to go through the roof. You mark my word, by 2026, that $30 is not going to be unrealistic, Chad. No. I'm telling you.
Well, the material costs are going to go through the roof along with it.
Yeah. Bill, you make an excellent point, and you're right. Up until roughly 1982, in the water area. The Fed was paying 75 cents on the dollar. The states were required to come up with another 10 or 15 cents, depending which state. And so the local government was getting, for a dime, getting $1 worth of infrastructure. And then in part because of the economy that we were coming out of in the 70s, coupled with the change in mindset about how much federal government should be investing in the local communities, and it was a pretty drastic change that occurred in the early 80s, then that all stopped. And we went for 40 years without doing the investment. And what IIJA and IRA and CHIPS Plus and the others are doing is trying to rectify 40 years of problem or neglect is the word I use, and in a period of 5 years. And the resources, and by the way, keep in mind, we took manufacturing and offshored it. We took chips and offshored them. We took material supply and offshored it. We took energy and offshored it. And at the end of the day, we became a service-oriented community, not a manufacturing-oriented community, which meant we also took our labor force and transmorphed it into another area. And then on your mark, get set, go. Here we are.
That's why we had probably one of the top 3 largest trade deficits we've ever had in the United States last year.
Yeah. Yep. And of course, you don't change that overnight. I mean, Intel can build that chip plant in Ohio that I mentioned at the earlier part of our conversation today, but they're not producing chips today. And so we are this lag and whatever is what we're dealing with. I can say ASCE has 2 individuals tied to our organization that work on the NIAC, the National Infrastructure Advisory Council for the President. And they're putting together and talking about things like favored nation status and how to address some of these issues. And even that's not a perfect solution because it's a bit of a patchwork. The one that a friend of mine used recently was we have Canada's favored nation, except when it comes to steel, because of wanting to protect that industry in that particular region. And so there's still politics involved in that process. But as we were saying earlier, the issues that Trina's looking at in terms of not being able to find aggregate, well, where's the aggregate coming from? Is there a local supplier? Probably not least in Galveston.
Right.
And so as a result, you end up, where are my sources? In the central part of the U.S., you look at the cement kilns that have been closed for whatever combination of reasons, and you have that piece. But I also look at vendors who refuse to make changes. I know of one project where they were looking at using Portland limestone cement, and the batch plant wouldn't put in the lime silos because they didn't believe it was going to happen again. And so basically what ended up happening was the contractor had to come in and put in the lime silo to meet the specifications for the project, but it impacted overall quality. So that goes back to this whole supply chain piece. It's different pieces. There's not a single bullet or answer for all of it. And we have created the problem. And it's good. There's going to be a ripple effect. Also recognize once prices go up, they very rarely come back down.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, the climate change movement itself is helping set this back, with the EV versus, gasoline trying to happen too fast, too furious. And I think you're going to see that the effect is that all the manufacturing is going to be done somewhere else. It's not going to ever be done here again because our regulatory requirements are way more stringent than they are in China or other places that are competing with us. And that's why China will be one of the next superpowers, because they're going to be fed it on a silver platter because we're doing it to ourselves.
Well, or the paradigm has to shift to where we're willing to pay a price that's commensurate with having it manufactured here, as opposed to where price controls and cheap labor exist for the sake of national security.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation that's already underway, but we have to acknowledge that it's the same way as recognizing that when we talk about this horrendous debt we have, recognize that China's the number 2 funder of that debt, with Japan just barely outstripping them in terms the percentage. Those two countries hold a quarter of all the deficit that we currently have.
Yeah, that's an interesting statistic. I saw that. I don't know if it was in USA Facts or something that came out with that,
Trina,
that diagram recently. It was very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, anyway. So in terms of supply chain.
Trina, do you have wanted to add into that
I'm
one?
sorry. Go ahead.
No, they're doing. I'm learning right now. Keep it going.
We got a little lag going. Sorry, guys.
Well,
Yeah, I was wondering what was happening.
I know. Me too. Sorry, guys.
well, going
Going
back,
on because I feel like there's a lag.
maybe your time's running out.
I think we were looking at Trino.
Maybe our time's running out.
We got 10 minutes. Just FYI, we got 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dennis. Sorry.
Well, no, that's all right. Going back to what I said earlier again, this idea of communication between the various entities that lead to the constructed product, the final product, from owner to contractor and beyond. Looking at, and I think it was Bill that made mention that sometimes decisions are made to put in equipment that's pretty cheap. The other conversation I want to advocate, or component I want to advocate for in this, to the extent we can, is trying to weigh delivery time versus longevity, the life cycle cost piece of this thing, and recognize that and I deal with in a community, in an area where the group of public officials are really good about wanting to pave roads, but what they do is they throw down some cheap semi-chip seal version of a road that keeps the dust down, and in 2 years are having to come back in and put another layer on or rebuild the road altogether, and then 2 years later they're coming back and doing the same thing, and so what you got was what you got, and it may or may not be what you really expected to get. But investing in the right thing, going back and talking about what's an alternative, do that value engineering, what's an alternative approach, collaborating with the contractor to find, maybe it's a different material, maybe we need a different switch gear, maybe there's a different, maybe we don't need brand new, going back to what I think you were saying, Bill, well, we know they're decommissioning a facility over here, let's go see what we can steal from it that's still usable, and incorporate that into our design.
So Dennis, based on what you're just saying, we're going through a lot of both of those areas. So like in our streets department, for example, there are years of using like a lower grade asphalt, for example, that is deteriorating faster on us. So now we've switched to a higher grade asphalt. It looks better. It, statistically should last longer. And so we've committed to that. But what that does is it increases the cost per street, which means less streets will get done based on our budget.
Correct.
However, higher quality. And then when it comes to like a lot of these projects, especially like the plans that Bill and I were both talking about. So now our group is having a balance between what we want to like hold strong to, and then where we want to, I guess back off for cost. And so we're going through a lot of these meetings now with us, our operations group, the contractor, engineer, sitting down and working through what's going to be the best value, for us. And at the same time, though, it's hard trying to make sure that you could still build this plant or pump station or road construction project within the budget that you have. And so in some cases, you are having to sacrifice, quality, to make the project happen. It's just an odd balance.
It is. And while treatment plants are a little different cat than a road, you hit on it. At the end of the day, is it more economical for me to build or rehab fewer roads, but do it better, so that over the period of time, I'm actually spending less? Right. And part of the problem comes where the construction budget for an agency and the maintenance budget of the agency are looked at as two different pots, instead of looking at them as one pot that everything has to come out of. Overbuilding and not being able to maintain what have you really achieved. You mentioned, and I think it's an absolutely excellent idea that we as engineers and contractors need to be thinking about, is designing our facilities in a modular way. So that, okay, I need 5 million gallons of wastewater treated in the future, but I need 2 million gallons treated today.
Yeah.
So I designed the plant. I'd like to put in the plant that's going to work for the next 25 years. The old approach that we've used in our profession for ad nauseum forever. Yeah. But recognize that today I have to meet a certain demand and I don't need the whole plant in place. And design it in such a way where I can then come back when this economy is straightened out, when resources are available, when the community's tax base or fee base is increased to a capacity where I can now put the next phase in, and you phase this work in. I had that problem on a building I was developing, and ultimately got constructed, where initially it looked like we were only going to build about a third of the building. So we compartmentalized the activities in the building so that one phase could come in, and then we could come in and put the second phase on. And so this complex concept of building in phases or stages gives us the opportunity to keep quality up, albeit at a high cost and a low result, with the idea that hopefully either the economy will stabilize or resources will stabilize or something's going to stabilize so that we can continue. Because if it doesn't stabilize, you may not need the other pieces anyway.
Yeah. I like what you're saying. I mean, on the modular level, that's what I did. You know, got 2.5, you know, I'm trying to get to 2.5 MGD from where I am now. It's a small plant. So 1.2, I'm adding 1.3 to get to 2.5, which will be a mirror kind of image to get to 5, to get to the other 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a, 1.25-ish, almost equal. I know they're a little odd because I had 1.2 and 1.3, but that wasn't my doing. So.
And I would advocate that the advantage of the modular approach, and this is also what you gentlemen had mentioned, was that if the longevity of the equipment we put in, sometimes you're putting in stuff that fails, and maybe you knew it was going to do that because of the warranty they provided. Maybe not. You can argue over the warranty issue, but you want equipment that's going to last and provide a return on that investment. And so, again, sometimes cheap is just what it is, cheap. But in the same breath, by modularizing, what you have an opportunity to do is get a feel for whether or not that particular manufacturer, that particular pump is working the way you want it to in terms of maintenance requirements or operational requirements or whatever. Is it what you were promised? And if it's not, then in the next phase, you haven't gone all in with this one design. You come back in, you replace that pump, and then the next phase, you find something better or use something better based on your experience.
Well, in addition to all of that, if everything is going to cost more, and in some cases, if we're going to have for something,
don't you dare.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, guys. Yeah, I got a lag going on, but I'm sorry, man. We got like 1 more minute, so go for it, Trino.
Okay, so I guess where I was going to get at is historically, cities and utilities have a very poor maintenance program. They're not embarking on the journey of reliability-centered engineering, reliability-centered maintenance. And I think if we're going to squeeze all the juice out of that lime, our industry needs to commit to building those type of programs so that the more expensive equipment that we're being forced to buy lives as long as it's supposed to.
Yes, I love it.
My 1 minute comment.
Well, go back 20 years ago, and both of you, I know all three of you probably remember the conversation about preventive maintenance.
Oh yeah, what's that? I was no reactive, is all I know.
Well, that's the idea was preventive maintenance, and then we didn't do it. Well, I advocate for more proactive maintenance.
Same here.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that you need to get ahead of this curve, fix it before it's broke, and extend its life, and that's throughout this industry.
Yeah. All right, Chad, it's all you.
Well, guys, I thank you all for being here. This is good. We could talk for another couple of hours, I think. This is so good to just hear this stuff. I think everybody, needs to hear it and help each other. It's super helpful. Bill Davis, Jimmy Stewart made a comment about your tie. He said it's normally not required, something like that. Depends on the audience, but when you're tied. So I just want to point that out. Gamecocks.
Yeah,
there we go.
It's a Gamecock.
Let's go.
No Clemson
Well, thank you
on
guys so much for joining. It's been great. Thanks for commenting, everybody. Keith and Jimmy. You guys have a great day, and we'll set up another one because I think we have a lot more to talk about, guys.
it. It was great, Chad. Be blessed, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Back at you. Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Okay, sir.
Thanks, guys.
Pleasure to meet you, Trent.
Likewise, Dennis. Hope we stay in touch.
Yeah, it would be really great. I mean, I just enjoy talking